Alright, let's take some time to understand what the PLCO JavaScript software development kit is about. So PLCO is a large NCI clinical trial. It's been going on for a long time, and recently, a year ago, the project started exposing a public API to some of its data, of course not individual level data. And the PLCO SDK, so the PLCOjs, was developed to mediate the engagement of this API. There are a number of ways it can be used. It could be used, for example, as I mentioned here, to create a data portal. Instead, in fact, the SDK methods are basically modularizations of the graphics and data retrieval procedures. So you could and should use SDKs to develop data portals in general, and PLCO SDK will provide you the component that helps you mediate the operation of PLCO's public APIs. There it is, so we are at NCI now, and these are the APIs we'll be using. When you use the portal, this is the real portal, you'll be creating Manhattan plots, QQ plots, and other types of plots by using components that PLCOjs modularized, extracted, and now you can use it in different places. And that's the first thing we'll be showing. So let's go to the tutorial. This is the recommended starting point. And right at the beginning you have information about how to load the SDK. There are a number of options. I'm going to choose the more modern, which is ES6 modules. So these are JavaScript modules. And I'm going to go to the latest issue of bioinformatics. If you click here, we could lift the veil, so to speak, so see what's going on underneath the web page. So we can explore this concept of an SDK, inserting graphic and data components in another construct. So if you go to more tools, I hope you can see them, and then expands to the right, you have an option for developer tools. And this is what you see. I'm going to open and close them with a shortcut. In a Mac, this would be Option Command I. See, open and close. So this is what's going on underneath the web page for the bioinformatics journal. So now I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to paste the load method we saw before. So I'm going to call PLCOjs and going to load this module. So the module is now available. We could look at what properties are there. You see that plot is there, and so is API. And you'll see we'll be using these methods as you go. So to exemplify the ability to incorporate both graphics and data processing components in a web page or a web application, including data portals, let's do this for the bioinformatics web page. So if you go here, you'll find out that this area is called master main, and it's the class master main. So let's get that element. So I'm going to say the UI we are going to be working with is going to be in the document where we are looking for an element with the class master main. Of course, what I'm doing here in the console, you would be doing in your IDE, developing your own code. And there it is. So we find it, it's there. So let's clean it so we can use it to illustrate this ability to incorporate the use of this SDK in another environment. So you have the smiley face here. Now if you go to the tutorial, so here, to the documentation, we'll be playing with some plots here. So you have the core, the root API elements, you have the API operation methods, and then you have the graphic elements. So these graphic elements call this API. They organize the data in a way that can be plotted, and then the Plotly library is used to render them. We'll get to that later on. Okay, and you have the same information along the tutorial, the recommended starting point for this exploration. Okay, anyway, we are here now. Let's go here and let's pick, for example, a Manhattan plot for two populations. So we have an example here, we'll be using it. And you see here the PLCO by whatever name. We gave it when we imported the methods. Plot Manhattan 2. This is the ID of the division where you want to plot it, and then the two populations. So let's do it. go back to the place where we are making this insertion. And now I'm going to define the contents of this user element as being a division, id equals to plot, and this will clear the environment. And now when I do PLCOjs, remember that's the object we chose to use to import it. There it is, PLCOjs. This will look for a division with id plot, and we'll compare these two populations using a Manhattan plot. And there it is. Now let's imagine that you'd like, and by the way, this is a fully functional graphic element. You can go in, go out. You can see the legends. It's fully integrated in the bioinformatics web page. You could change here the values you are looking at. You could also download this and then use it later on, for example, here. So just to illustrate the point that all of these elements, they speak to each other and the graphics move around with the data. You'll see the data a little later in this presentation. Okay, so back here, so it's all there. Now let's imagine that instead of a Manhattan plot, you want something more intensive data-wise, and could be, for example, let's see, I believe I have a PCA. Yep, there it is, PCA. So we go there, and we're going to reuse the ID plot. So this plot is going to replace the existing one, and we're going to get this. So let's go. I keep confusing the tabs. So we know PLCOjs. Now using the plot method, specifically the principal component analysis for two groups. And these are the two phenotypes we are looking at. The two populations, sorry. The phenotype is the same, breast cancer. And there it is. So now notice that when we run these commands, this is executed as a promise. You could say wait. In this case, you get the HTML. So this is the same plot here. See, but you could say that you don't want to plot. You also don't want to manually moving the data around. You just want the data. So I'm going to activate that flag here at the end. True. And now we're going to call it data equals. And there it is. So we have our 6 traces. Let's make sure they are there. So it's the same traces you have here. Let's look for the first one with 83,629 subjects. Let's find out. Let's get a little bit more room. And there they are, 83,629. So you now could use this data for other analysis. The data structure used to generate the plots is the same one that is represented when you ask for the data. And that data structure can be consumed by any environment where Plotly is supported. So this is a very popular library precisely because of their ability, its ability to to generate graphic representations in multiple languages. So if you go to Plotly, somewhere here we can read about language support. So let's see, JavaScript, there it is. So all these languages, Python, R, Julia, JavaScript is the one we are using. MATLAB is here as well. All of these environments can be engaged with Plotly reading the same data structure that we're just looking at. Okay, at this point I'm probably starting to confuse you with jumping around between tabs. So let's be more systematic now. So if you go to the tutorial, which is what is described in the second part of this YouTube video, so that's what we are about to do now. So let's click on it. We are going to an observable notebook. So this is just a place where we can write JavaScript without doing it in the confusing console of one and multiple tabs. So you already know you can mix the use of SDK with a web application. You can call it from different environments. You can consume the data. Now let's systematically go through this rationale. So there are 3 ways to load the PLCOjs, so the JavaScript SDK that operates the PLCO APIs. One is the popular and widely used script tag loading method, where the code is injected into your browser. You can also use common JS require mechanisms. So this is an early attempt, and it's quite popular still, to modularize JavaScript code into modules that can be required. This mimics the same behavior of the web stack on the server side in Node.js, for those who are curious about that. And then we have the more modern, the import ES6 modules import mechanism, which is the one we just used. So for anything that you see in the tutorial, this is like Jupyter Notebooks but reactive. By the way, that argument is made here if you're curious. Why reactive, reproducible, and collaborative notebooks go to places that Jupyter Notebooks, for example, do not. So you can read about this here. But back to how to use observable notebook. So for anything you see here, for instance, this is PLCO2. This is the command, and you could freeze it open, or you can close it. So here, for example, we are checking that the PLCOjs API is working. So plco.api ping. And if we try it here again, you'll see PLCO API ping. And if you press in this arrow, or you press shift return, is the same, it's evaluated. So we know it's working. So same thing here. By the way, you can edit this observable notebook. You won't be able to republish it on my behalf, because you are not, the notebook is not being shared with you for republishing. But you can write any code, you can change anything. Don't worry about messing things up. It won't. So this is the example we went through as well, the Manhattan plot, and sure enough, you find out that there is a division. Here I'm using plot man2 as the ID, and then you have the command here, plco.plot manhattan2, and the ID of the division, and then the two populations. Could do the same thing with the data, you know that already. So if you open the code, you find out that's exactly what we are doing here. So we're now looking at another, actually it makes no difference at this point, because we are extracting data, not plotting, so this could be anything. Then you have the two populations. Here is a parameter. If you go to the documentation, this specifies minus logarithm of the p-value, so this is values that are below 0.01. This is if you wanted to select a specific chromosome, and here is you just want the data. And sure enough, here's the data. In this case, you have 22 chromosomes twice, so one per each of the two populations are being compared. This is just to illustrate the fact that once you have the data structure, you can use Plotly to consume it, and that's what we do here. So you see here Plotly, new plot, creating a div, populating it with X and Y, extracted only for the first chromosome of the first population. So if you want to compare this with this, you should get the same profile and the same values. So this illustrates the extraction process. We look at this as well, and I believe I get the data, or maybe I don't. No, I just do the plot here. And then we have another example of exporting data with this idea that a lot of people, when they see a plot, they just want the tabular data for that graphic representation. So here I'm using another one. This is the bar chart. Again, it's another method. You can read about it here. So if you go to the documentation, plot bar chart, you can read more about this. It just provides a quick description, a quick breakdown of the participants by gender and by phenotype. So let's go back here. So what you'll see here is that the default title is incomplete, borderline misleading. So we are missing here what is the null 0 and 1, which is the breast cancer diagnosis. And let's say you want to fix it using the feature that this data structure will be consumed by Plotly natively. So if we change the title will be changed in the representation. And that's what we do here. Further down, number of participants by breast cancer diagnosis and sex. And there it is. Okay, and this tutorial wouldn't be complete without touching on the issue of fairness. So can we come up with solutions that are findable, accessible, interoperable, and this is the most defining characteristic, reusable? This is something you can verify in practice. So let's do it. So before doing it, these 2 points, let's recall the context. So if you represent it, for example, data retrieved from the GWAS Explorer with the PLCOjs SDK to generate principal component analysis data, like here, you remember that we can download the data, go to a tool that renders the graphics, not just the data, portable, regenerate the tool with the drop-down menu for different possibilities. So this is all being ported by this data file. It's not entirely satisfactory because this was a manual process, and that's what the fair section is about. So if I now place this JSON file in a place with version hosting, it could be GitHub GH pages, as I do here. I'm using actually my personal org here. So if I open, you get the data. So the data is all there. Now let's imagine that the product of this analysis with the PLCOjs SDK produced this representation, and I need to make it available in the legend of a figure, say in a publication, such that the readers can reproduce the analysis, including the interaction. So here's a test. So I have a URL shortener, produce this, which is the concatenation of the tool and the URL of the data, and you get the same results. All right, and I think this completes the tutorial. Bye now.